Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. It all started with a house, a grieving woman, and in-laws who thought squatting and forging documents was a foolproof plan. Today in the rLounge, when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. In-laws moved into my house without permission, so I sold it and left them homeless. I, 36 female, lost my husband a year ago. You can well imagine how it feels like to lose your partner at such an early age, especially when our marriage was going great. We were married for 9 years and dated for 4 years before that. We have 2 kids, 5 female, 3 male, whose responsibility has fallen solely on me. In this tough time, instead of supporting me and their grandkids, in-laws are poaching onto my property and making an unreasonable demand. They have captured my house, claiming themselves to be the rightful owner of the place despite a clear will left by my husband that all his possessions would be passed on to me, and in situations where both of us are gone together, it would be equally split between my children, and their legal guardian would be his best friend, who is the godfather of our children. Yes, sounds absurd, but he trusted his best friend more than his parents and sister. Why would he not? His parents have always been mean and wicked, especially towards me. They barely tolerated me while he was alive, and now that he's gone, they didn't even have to pretend anymore. They thought I wasn't good enough for their son and that he deserved better. They wanted someone meek and timid as his wife whom they could manipulate and exploit, but I'm not a weak person. I could see through their motive and called them out whenever they tried to cross their boundary. My husband was a man of standard. He always stood by me and never let anyone disrespect me, hence in-laws never had the courage to say anything mean on my face. Once mother-in-law said something and my husband threatened to cut them off. Since then, they backed off. It was not that they'd respected his words or boundaries, but my husband was a golden goose for them. He had been the bright and ambitious of all their 3 children. He was hardworking and smart, got a college education on merit, and landed a high-paying job in finance. Maybe in-laws knew he was a winning horse, hence never left him alone. To them, he was an investment. They raised him with the expectation of reaping the returns, and for years they tried to cash in. Ever since he got his first paycheck, their demand for money started flowing in. The poor guy had to give in to their whims. After all, they were his parents. They raised him and he couldn't let them live in poverty while hoarding up the wealth in his bank. Helping your parents is one thing, but parents feeling entitled to children's earnings, burdening one child with all the responsibility while coddling and supporting the others is pathetic. And that's what his parents always did. Exploited my husband and supported their other 2 children. Brother-in-law and sister-in-law are losers mooching off of their parents. They don't have a real job. Brother-in-law is always on the run, chased by the bank or the lenders who gave him the money. God knows what he did with the money. He's MIA for the last few years. Some say he has fled the country because he owed a lot to the bank and had no money to pay it back. Contrary, sister-in-law is a chaser. She chases men who can pay her bills, but for a change this time, she's in love with a broke man. Husband's parents always took money from him and showered on the other 2. During the initial days of our dating and marriage, when the money requests came, I didn't mind much. Slowly as I got to know them, I saw their real faces. I showed the truth to my husband. It took him a while to grasp it. It wasn't so tough for me. I just had to show him the number of times they called him for money versus how many times to check on him. There was this constant ask for money under the guise of needs, medical bills, house repairs, and loans that never got repaid. He cared for his parents and he wanted to make their lives easier. When he finally started to see their entitlement, he pulled back, and since then, the tiff began. Then there was the final nail in the coffin. His parents asked him to buy a house for them before starting a family of his own. The thing was, my husband always had a dream of owning a house because he grew up moving from one apartment to another. His parents didn't make enough to own a place. That's the reason he wanted his children to grow up in their own house. So before starting a family, he wanted to buy a place. But his parents had different plans. They insisted my husband buy them a house first, and then have his own, and then he probably can have kids. Really? Are you serious? You're telling a 30-year-old man to buy 2 houses and then plan children. If we followed their plan, he would have never had children. My husband put his foot down and said, "No way. I'm getting my house first and starting our family." Not only did he refuse to oblige, but he also cut them off financially, saying he needs to save for the future. We bought our house and had our first baby. A few years back, father-in-law retired and bought a modest home for themselves. We were relieved that now they won't bother us for a house. We were living happily with 2 amazing kids and thought of building a peaceful life together, but sadly, I lost him. I'm tearing up as I write this. It's been a year, but I still cannot bring myself to accept that he's no more. It has never been the same since then. I was forced to make difficult choices. I had been a stay-at-home mom since my younger one was born. My husband made enough for the 4 of us, and we could sustain on a single income until the kids could take care of themselves. Before that, I wanted to dedicate a few years to my children before going back to work. Now that my husband is gone, I had to re-enter the workforce. It has been brutal, juggling full-time work and 2 small children while navigating grief. My parents, thankfully, stepped in to help, but they lived an hour away. The location of my house wasn't ideal anymore. It was too far from the city, from my parents, from my job. When my husband was alive, it worked because we had each other to share the responsibilities. But I was alone now, juggling a full-time job and 2 small kids. Living closer to their school and my workplace was the smarter choice. So, 2 months back, I moved closer to my parents, but I wasn't ready to sell the house just yet. Leasing it out seemed like the best option until I could figure out what's next. I hired a property manager to lease it out. That's when everything fell apart. A week ago, I got a call from my property manager. He told me that an elderly couple had moved into the house saying it was theirs. I felt my stomach drop before he even said the names. I knew, of course. I knew. Who else could it be except my in-laws? I called them immediately. Susan, mother-in-law, was already furious with my call and screamed, "It's our son's house. It belongs to his family." Her words made my blood boil. His family? You mean his wife and children? She scoffed. "We are not him that you could manipulate. We are his parents. We raised him. He owed us. If it weren't for us, he wouldn't have had anything to leave you." I was blown away by her response. I mean, how difficult was it to understand that he left a will? Everything he owned was legally left to me and our children, and they have no right to that house or anything for that matter. She screamed, "You manipulated him. You controlled him, turned it against us. You fought with him all the time. That's why he crashed. He was stressed because of you." I felt like I had been stabbed. His accident still haunted me. But the police report had been clear. He had been exhausted and distracted, but no one knew why. Maybe it was work. Maybe it was his parents. Maybe it was both. But Susan was twisting the knife and turning it on me. At his funeral as well, some of the people heard her saying that I was the reason for her son dying because I had stressed him out with the financial burden when the truth was he was always bothered by their financial demands. What's the point of talking to that crap-headed woman? I immediately called the cops on them. Guess what? Apparently they had a will where my husband had given the house to them. I fought back that the house was willed to me and the document they're showing was forged. The cops told me he could not verify the legality of the will, hence I needed to register a case on them and the matter would be discussed in court. It was now a civil matter. The police couldn't remove them. I would have to take them to court. I panicked. I mean court. As if I had the luxury of time, energy, or money to fight them. Legal battles weren't just expensive, they were draining. Every minute spent in a courtroom was a minute stolen from my work or children. They know I couldn't skip work and responsibilities to fight with them. They are counting on me to give up. I'm not going to let them win for sure, but what options do I have? I could drain my savings and fight them legally, but that means sacrificing security for my children. If it's so evil that they are snatching away the security of their own grandkids, especially now that they don't have a father to have their back. Never mind, they have me, and I'm going to fight till the end to get back what is ours. It's disgusting that instead of stepping up to support you and their grandkids during such a devastating time, they're trying to steal the home your husband left for you. You've already been through so much, losing your husband, becoming a single parent overnight, and having to rebuild your life while grieving. I know the idea of a court battle is daunting, but if you have the means, please don't back down. Given that there's already a legitimate will in place, their forged document should fall apart under scrutiny. Update 1. I didn't report them right away. Instead, decided to discuss it with a lawyer. Susan thought this to be their victory. She went about telling everyone how gallantly she had reclaimed the house. I got to know that she wasn't just after the house out of greed. She was furious at the thought that I might remarry and that another man could end up living in her son's house. She was jealous that an outsider would get to live in her son's house. Some of the relatives tried to fight my case and told her to give back the house for the children's sake, to which she had told them, "The kids eventually will move out in a few years and that whore would F jerks at my son's house. He bought this place with his sweat and blood. I'm not going to let that witch have it." It was so insulting and infuriating, as if the house belonged to her and she could dictate what I do with that house. Her son left it to me because he trusted me. He had a responsibility towards me and his children. She saw me as nothing more than an outsider who had taken her son away and now was inheriting his property. She doesn't understand that I too contributed to that house, but it was worthless fighting with them. I discussed it with my lawyer and realized that while I could report my in-laws and take them to court, it wouldn't be worth the trouble. Legally, I had a strong case. My husband had left behind a will that made it clear that everything belonged to me and our children. But the catch was that, since my in-laws were elderly, they might be spared any real consequences for trespassing or even forging the will. At best, I could have them removed from the house, but that wouldn't stop them from coming back later, harassing tenants, or finding new ways to create legal trouble. Yes, restraining order could be taken, but it would be a constant nuisance. They have all the time in the world to trouble me, but I don't have the resources to deal with them forever. I wasn't about to spend the next several years dealing with them. I had to be practical. Considering everything, I made a hard decision. Selling the house seemed to be the best solution. Emotionally, it was tough. This was the home my husband and I had built together. It was supposed to be where we raised our children, where we grew old together. Now it was nothing more than a battleground, a source of stress and conflict. Keeping it was not an option. I listed the house for sale, hoping to get rid of it as quickly as possible, but being the miserable, greedy people they are, made it impossible for me to sell the property directly. I didn't consider that they still lived there, and they wouldn't let anyone see the house. Every time a potential buyer visited, they would chase them away. They claimed it was their house and that I was lying about the will. No one wanted to buy a house that came with a built-in legal battle. They became a bum sore. My parents came up with an idea to try a different approach. My uncle is into construction business. He has a lot of contacts with different builders across the state. I met him and discussed my problem. I wanted to sell the house without my in-laws knowing about it. My uncle didn't deal with the property in that area, but he introduced me to someone in his network who was extensively into buying and selling property in our area. I narrated to him my problem transparently. He showed interest, or maybe took pity on me. He's my uncle's friend, so maybe. I told him about the in-laws' nuisance. He smirked that they dealt with this kind of situation all the time. Apparently, construction business comes with a lot of legalities and trespassers. He did his due diligence and verified the papers. He even sent his employees, disguised as pest control officers, to assess the condition of the house. Made me wonder how easy it is for people to get into our house, or if it was just easier to fool the old hags. Anyway, it took almost 3 months to verify all the documents and do the paperwork. Finally, the deal is sealed. The house is sold. The only downside is that I had to settle for a slightly lower than the market price. Had to offer a discount to compensate for the hassle my in-laws would bring. But in the totality of things, the discount was a small price to pay. It was still far less than what I would have spent on a lengthy legal battle. More importantly, it freed me from their toxicity. The new owner is an inch closer to evicting the entitled in-laws. I cannot wait to see their reaction when they are thrown out of the house. Her obsession with keeping you from tainting her son's house while completely disregarding the fact that he left it to you and his children is literally despicable. Selling it and cutting ties sucks, but it was the best way to truly be free of them. Your in-laws thought they won, but in the end they're about to be kicked out of the house they illegally claimed, and they won't even see it coming. Update 2. The new owner wasted no time. Within a week of the deal, he sent them a formal notice to vacate the premises immediately. They were given a week to leave. It was disastrous when they were informed that the house was sold. They blew up my phone. I conveniently blocked both of them. I know they couldn't do anything about it except scream and call me names. Still, I didn't want to give them the space to vent. They should suffocate on their own anger. They didn't have the audacity to show up at my place knowing that my parents lived nearby and they would beat the crap out of them. But they didn't give up immediately and try to put up a fight that the house was legally theirs and that I had no right to sell it. But this time, they weren't just dealing with an individual who had no time and resources to fight back. No, they were now up against a construction company with a team of legal experts sitting at their back office, ready to fight all the nonsense that comes in their way of their business. When they realized they had no chance of winning over them, they claimed their tenants' rights and demanded a month's time to vacate. The owner was like, "Okay, where's the lease document? You don't have it, right? Okay, cool. Let's have some pity on old hags and we'll give you 1 more week to disappear with all your stuff." The owner didn't just stop at the eviction notice. He filed a lawsuit against them for forgery and trespassing. The forged will they had been parading around was now being officially scrutinized. They panicked when the legal pressure started building up. They essentially got the taste of their own medicine. They had planned to crumble me with a legal battle, but now the time has changed, and they're facing a builder who had nothing to lose and all the resources to crush them legally. They didn't stand a chance against corporate lawyers who chewed up cases like theirs for breakfast. When they finally realized they were facing an opponent who wouldn't flinch, they folded. Just like that. They surrendered. They didn't even try to appeal or delay the process because deep down they knew they had no claim. The will they had forged wasn't just a fake, it was laughably bad, and any further attempt to defend it would have only added to their humiliation and legal consequences. They packed their bags and left like the pathetic cowards they were, and begged the builder to clear all the charges he put on them and promised never to set an eye on the house. You think they went through worse? Hold on. It turns out that they had nowhere else to go. They had already given away their own house to their precious daughter. They had always favored her, spoiled her, and treated her like a princess who would never lift a finger. And in that spirit, they had gifted their house to her, believing they would live comfortably in my husband's house for the rest of their lives. They had never imagined I would sell it and they would end up homeless. When they received the eviction notice, they went back to sister-in-law, asking her to give them back the house. But here's the best part. She refused. She flat out told them that the house was hers now and she had no space for them. It sounds bizarre, right? Knowing the entitled witch sister-in-law is, I know this is true. She's spoiled and mean. In-laws coddled her so badly that she's in her 30s without a job and without any plan for the future. She was living in a garage with her broke boyfriend when in-laws gave her the house, and there's no way she would leave that house. Whether they had officially transferred ownership to her or not, she wasn't budging, and knowing the kind of entitled brat she was, there was no chance she would let them have their house back. They had raised a selfish, spoiled woman whose only intention was to use others for her benefit. I have no idea what legal standing they have regarding the house they gave away. If they officially transferred it to her, then their fate is sealed. If not, maybe they'll try to fight her for it. But that's not my problem anymore. If you see it this way, karma screwed them. They tried to steal my home and in the process lost their own. Now they're left with nothing. For me, it still hurts that I had to sell my husband's dream house, but gradually I have come to terms that it was meant to be. Not only because they had squatted, but also for my own closure. I was unable to move on. It's almost going to be 2 years now, and I still grieve as if it was yesterday. I'm not saying I should have dated or married by now. No way. It's a far-fetched thing, if at all. But I think in 2 years, one should be able to accept the situation and move on and not hold on to the grief. Before I moved out of that house, I anticipated my husband to maybe just walk in from outside and say it wasn't him in the accident. I know it sounds crazy, but I just wished he somehow returned. I know it's impossible, but I wasn't ready to accept it. Even when in-laws captured the house, I used to drive past it and lingered on the house, remembering all the memories I had. I had forgotten how to live. I'm just surviving, working, paying the bills, and taking care of the children. That's how my life has become. I don't go out with friends or do anything for myself. I think now after selling the house, I feel I have bid the final goodbye to my husband and accepted the fate that he won't come back, and I have to move on with my life. My children are my source of strength and happiness. I couldn't uphold my husband's dream house, but I wish to give my children a good life just the way my husband had dreamt of. I just want to acknowledge the weight of what you're carrying, OP. Selling the house wasn't just about getting rid of squatters. It was about saying a final, painful goodbye to the life you had built with your husband. Moreover, it's satisfying to see your in-laws get exactly what they deserved. They tried to take everything from you, and in the end, they lost everything themselves. Your husband may not be here physically, but through your love, strength, and the life you're building for your children, his dreams are still alive. Wishing you all the best, OP. Thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time. And please put your chair back where you found it.